Hey gang, it's Mary Jo again. To my bookish friends out there, there's really not been any rhyme or reason to the booktube videos I've done. I'm still kind of new and feeling my way into this and trying to figure out if it's something I really want to invest more time in. So far it's been fun, but I had to get on today. I had to because simply writing a review was not enough. I finished a trilogy today that I am absolutely devastated by and obsessed with, if that makes sense. It was one of those moments where I finished the trilogy and I closed my Kindle. It was on my Kindle app, and I closed the iPad cover and I just kind of looked around my office, and for a split second thought, what do I do with my life now? Like, this trilogy is over. It's been wrapped up beautifully. There is one more little novella prequel I can go read. There were two of them that she wrote to go with the series, but this is maybe one of the best trilogies I've read in a long time. No, maybe about it. It's one of the best series I've read recently. And that's saying a lot because there's a couple of other series out there. I'm rather three other series out there to be specific. I am crazy in love with, and this one lands itself right there. The really cool thing about this one is I've talked about her before. This is an indie author I found on Twitter of all places. But I read the final book of the Starseed Trilogy by Ashley McLeod. The book is called Rising of Three. If you missed the last video, or just to refresh your memory, it's a book about three sisters, triplets, who didn't even know the others existed. When they're about 20, they're brought to this little tiny cottage in Ireland called Fern Cottage, and there they are told that they're triplets. Surprise! That were sent to live with other families. They were adopted out because it is believed that they are a set of sisters, a set of witches spoken of in a prophecy. And if they are indeed those witches, they are extremely powerful. They are extremely important. Excuse me. And those they're supposed to defeat would want to destroy them before they could ever be powerful enough to really do what they're supposed to do. The first two books built on one another beautifully. You have Lily, who's the oldest born, who was raised on a commune in Oregon. You have Evelyn, who was raised by a corporate family in New York City, worked for her dad all of her professional career, raised in a lot of wealth and luxury and a lot of privilege. Daddy has a private jet that he can use to get her wherever she needs to go. Daddy's company has a private jet. Sarah, her story was a little more tragic. Her first set of adoptive parents passed away in a car accident. The next set of adoptive parents was not very loving, very performance-oriented, very perfectionistic in their expectations of her. And she never really felt like she fit in. And without giving away any spoilers, their job is to, their calling, their prophecy is to fulfill, or is to defeat this race that's come sort of through another dimension. Their planet's dying. They've sucked all the life out of it, which is what's given them all of their magical powers. These three sisters are believed to sort of be the three original daughters of the king reincarnated, in a sense. That's not quite how it happens, but that's the hint all the way through the first book and 2/3 of the second book, and then you find out there's sort of a twist on the reincarnation storyline that's actually really, really cool. But in the first book, we get a lot of Lily's story, and in the second book, we get a lot more of Evelyn's, whose love relationship takes a tragic twist, kind of. The man she's fallen in love with isn't all he appears to be, but then he's not what he appears to be at second glance either. He becomes sort of a double agent working for the sisters and their families by the third book. These girls are lovable and they're flawed, and Lily and Evelyn especially take a long time to reach a place where they see each other as family. Their personalities don't click right away. And poor Sarah, the third sister, feels like she's caught in the middle trying to play peacemaker all the time. Every book has a battle. Every book has a good versus evil fight. And in the first book, Lily loses a loved one, and it's against these two evil vampires, one of whom had tried to seduce Lily when she was still in college. The second book has a slightly bigger battle where we meet the king of this other race coming from this other dimension, and his trusted right-hand man who's just vile. And so now we begin to see the plot thicken, and there's a traitor in the midst of the girl's family, who outs herself. Really, she's found out because she writes a letter to the mom. It's like, look, I think you were wrong to send the girls away, and screw you all, I'm going to work for these guys now. Freely admits to kidnapping one of the girls, and which leads to the whole battle in the second book. So I got to the third book and I went, how are they going to top this? How could Ashley possibly go any further? But she does it. The third book is, I got to one point in the book there's a big party happening. I'm not going to tell you what the cause is because that'll be a spoiler. And all of a sudden, there's like this ground shaking rumble that begins, and all of a sudden, the fight's on them. They don't travel to the fight. They don't have time to prepare for the fight. The bad guys are there at their doorstep while they're having a party. So they have to scramble to get ready. They have to scramble to get people in position. And so many people in the supernatural community believe in these girls that they have their own little, they call them the triplets army. They have their own little collection of magical supernatural creatures to fight with them and for them. A couple of things I love about the book is the girls are not always perfect and they don't always get everything right. And Ashley shares a lot of the characters' own insecurities. So in the first book, we see a lot of Lily and we get a lot of the looks inside her head. Second book, we get a little bit more of Evelyn and seeing a little bit more too of Sarah and seeing where she kind of feels her place is in the family. Third book, Lily's pretty well established, so you kind of know where she's coming from. Evelyn, again, we see a lot of growth in her because she's got a lot to recover from after the end of the second book, physically and emotionally. But we start getting a real peek into Sarah's mind and how it works and where her insecurities lie. It's kind of on her to help save the day in the final battle. But it's a powerful story because these women have to learn to deal with their weaknesses. They have them, and the author doesn't hide them. They have to learn to control their magic. They have to learn to control their tempers and their moods and all of these things. But in the midst of all of this, of course, they're going to defeat the great evil. It's just how it works. But in the midst of all of it, they come to really lean on each other as sisters. They become family, while at the same time welcoming in the families that raised them. By the end of the second book, Evelyn's family knows the truth about who she is. Lily's family always knew. Lily's adoptive family always knew because her adoptive mom had a fling with one of her aunts when they were in college. So she's always known the truth about Lily and who her family was, and always knew that she would be returning her to Ireland at some point. Evelyn's family was a little more in the dark. A family friend placed her there. And so they were a little more in the dark, but after things went down in the second book and she vanished for a while, they felt the need to tell her family and her best friend. So they're very aware of who she is and have embraced her in spite of that. Lily's family frequently comes to visits, but Lily's adoptive mom was a witch too, so that makes a little more sense. Sarah, like I said, really didn't have any family to stay connected to after she came to Fern Cottage. So it's very important to her that this family work, and you see a lot of that played out in this book, a lot of her personal security issues. But do yourself a favor, if you like the fantasy genre at all, it's not necessarily my go-to genre. My go-to genre is actually murder, crime, mystery. Think James Patterson, John Sanford, Patricia Cornwell, Janet Ivanovich. That's where I used to live genre-wise, and I've become an absolute fantasy nut in about the last year, thanks to a couple of different authors. But I am just a little bit devastated that this trilogy is done. My only consolation is I've read one of the prequel novellas for it called Rogue Fae. You need to check that one out too. Deals with the girl's Aunt Gwen and Lily's mom Rena when they were younger and in college. Great little, don't let it fool you. Yes, it's a novella, but the storyline is still amazing. And the characters are very believable. Those that you know from the trilogy are very believable as the 20-something versions of themselves in this novella. There's one other novella I need to read called Siren Song, so I'm holding out hope that I get one last fix of this family, but I am absolutely thrilled that I read the trilogy all the way through, and a little bit devastated that it's done and I'm done reading it and I'm done encountering this family. I kind of want to go back and reread it all again, but I have a to-be-read list as long as my arm. But do yourself a favor. Go to Amazon, go to whatever your favorite book publisher is. I got them on Kindle. I do a lot of ebooks because I can get them right away and they're cheaper. I got them all of mine off of Amazon, but go find the Starseed Trilogy. Trust me, Prophecy of Three, Souls of Three, and Rising of Three, you will want to read all three of them. I promise you, once you start, you're going to be hooked. You're going to love the families. The other thing, and when I did the review of the first book, I brought this up. If you know what the Bechdel test is, the Bechdel test was originally applied to movies, and it's become since applied to things like plays and live shows and books. But looking at how women are portrayed in stories and movies and plays and musicals and books, because it's surprising the number of books, movies, plays, musicals that don't meet this criteria. The criteria for passing the Bechdel test is there must be at least two women who have full names. They must have a first and last name. They must have names. They must have a conversation of some length, and that conversation needs to include something other than a man, other than a romantic encounter or romantic potential encounter. So two women, both of whom have names, they have a conversation of some length that's not about a man. All three of these books pass that test with flying colors without sacrificing the ability to find love. One of the girls, I'm not going to give away who, but one of the girls is married by the end of the series. Like, that's how the series ends, is her wedding. So it's not that these girls are strong women because they hate all men. There are also lesbians in the storyline, and one of the girls has found a sweetheart friend that she meets as a result of the battle. Others are working on mending broken relationships and things. But the point is, these women are strong, and the men that are in the story as a part of the story. In the first book, there really aren't many main characters that are men. In the second book, most of the men that show up end up being villainous. And in the third book, there are some hero types, but they never feel the need to step in and intervene and fix it for the girls. They let the girls do what they need to do, and they play background roles and allow them to fulfill the prophecy they're supposed to fulfill, which is awesome. So if you're looking for books with really strong female characters, presented not as perfect, because they're not. They've got their flaws. They've got their issues. At various times throughout the story, I wanted to strangle all three of the girls and be like, would you stop for a minute? They're 21-year-olds. So, they behave like 21-year-olds, believably so. But they're strong women who don't necessarily see their own strength being diminished in any way by being in a loving, balanced relationship, which is really kind of cool. It's a cool thing to find in an author who can find that balance in literature. She's created these beautifully strong, lovable characters who don't diminish at all when they fall in love with a strong, capable man who is their equal in a lot of ways. These are women born with magical superpowers. You kind of figure that it's probably a good idea if they find men who have some abilities of their own. But it's a beautiful blending of strong female characters with, it is possible to be a strong woman and find a man who's not threatened by that and fall in love. So do yourself a favor, get on your favorite book vendors, whatever they may be. Follow Ashley on Twitter. Cleo Writes, McCleo Writes on Twitter. Follow her. She's got a Facebook page too. I don't remember what that is off the top of my head, but you want to go read this series. If you like young adult fantasy at all, if you like fantasy at all, I'm not sure if it's even supposed to be YA, but if you like fantasy at all, you want to check this series out. Have a great night.